Hey there. So I thought I would do a blog a little bit different today, and it's been a while since it's just been me instead of doing interviews, savorfoodandbody interviews on the blog. And I wanted to give you some insight on a really great conversation that I had with a client just last week. And we were talking about meal planning and meal prepping and how that can just be so fraught with leftover baggage and information when you're coming out of a long-term history with dieting and following meal plans. And to be honest, those are easy. It was easy to follow. If you're in this situation, you may have found that it was easy to follow meal plans and done for you menus and grocery lists and all of that. And this client and I were having that conversation around how, when life is getting hard and the shiitake is hitting the fan, dieting and the rules that go with it give you something to lean on and help you make sense of how to feed yourself. So whether it's the list to go take to the grocery store and you get to eat these foods and you don't eat these foods, or it's a full-blown menu plan, but it makes eating easy. And intuitive eating is not that way. It's not prescriptive that way. It's asking you to do a lot of internal work for yourself. And that's super hard when you haven't ever been asked to do that for many years. And it's hard on top of just navigating life in general. So I wanted to offer that up to you, and in case you find some comfort in hearing that also, that if that's something you experience with, you're definitely not alone. And that can be one of the biggest challenges of turning towards intuitive eating, coming from a dieting past, is just this big question of just tell me what to eat. I don't know how to feed myself. And that can sound silly and can sound really basic, but to be honest, that's what I hear time and time again from clients, and I went through it myself too. There were many times where I thought, if I just went, this was before I was a dietitian, that if I just went to a nutrition professional, that they would give me the script on what I'm supposed to eat. And it was, of course, many years later that I started working with intuitive eating personally and professionally, and I went, oh, this really gives you the tools to figure out those answers for yourself and not trying to hold fast to a prescription, a diet prescription. So if that's the space you're in, I totally get it and I feel for you, and you're not alone. There are many people that are going through those same hurdles when they're turning from dieting to intuitive eating. And I want to offer something that hopefully this would be helpful. If it's not, you can press stop and go on about your day. But as the client and I were kind of brainstorming through how to help her recognize that she didn't want to diet anymore. She didn't want to go back to those prescriptive meal plans and grocery lists, and at the same time recognizing that they were easier. So what we did is we took some basic nutrition, kind of one-on-one nutrition principles, and applied it to how she could easily make her own grocery list and kind of have a pinup for the fridge of how she could feed herself. So here's just an example. Again, take what works for you, leave the rest. And if it's helpful, I'd love to hear in the comments. You can always find me and reply directly to me at amanda@alpinenutrition.org. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, and what you experience. So to talk about the kind of the basic nutrition 101 that she and I walked through together, in that there are just some basic components that our bodies need every single day to be well nourished. And that's protein, carbs, and fat. So those are called macronutrients because we need them in greatest quantities throughout our day. Our carbohydrates are our primary fuel source for our body. Protein is building muscle and repairing hair and repairing skin and all of that. And of course, fat is keeping us insulated. It's keeping our brains happy, and it's helping us absorb vital nutrients that are only fat soluble. So we need all three of those macronutrients every single day. And this client, she had the brilliant idea to call them a trinity, and kind of her Trinity of Gentle Nutrition, she called it. And I just love that idea. And I like to think about like a three-legged stool, and you have to have all three of those legs sitting firmly on the ground, otherwise the stool would tip over, right? So having this threesome of nutrients and how they interplay together is super important for our bodies every day. So what we did then to help her figure out, well, how do I translate that into going to the grocery store, and then how to making meals for myself? So what we did is we took each one of those categories, and I had her write down on a piece of paper. Maybe this would be helpful for you too. I think that there's a lot of value in kind of brain dumping out onto paper and helping you kind of go through this process and find your own level of clarity. So writing down on the paper protein, carb, fat, and in making columns with each one of those. And then go through and just think for yourself, what are some main protein sources that you regularly have in your house? So is that maybe some ground meat, some chicken, some tofu, some beans, nuts and seeds? Those can kind of go in two categories between protein and fat. But just thinking about, what do you already have in the house that might be protein sources? Eggs is another easy go-to. Fish, of course, also. So just writing down, I would say 4, maybe 5, if you want to be a little bit more extensive, main protein sources that you know that you already eat on a somewhat regular basis. Then the next step we can go through is carbs. So again, under the carb heading, jotting down 4 to 5 foods that you regularly eat or that you regularly have on hand that are considered carbohydrates. So that's anything from any grain-based products. So if that's bread, pasta, or maybe the grains themselves, like cooking up some rice, quinoa if you want to be a little fancier, and any other ancient grains. This particular client was really into ancient grains, and she really likes the nuttiness of them and finds them really satisfying. So she'll cook up a pot of those for herself too. Oatmeal, of course, easy go-to option for mornings. And so anything that has carbohydrates too in them. And I would also add any of your starchy veggies too. So at our house, we're a big fan of sweet potatoes, just roasted sweet potatoes and regular potatoes. Those can go with a lot of different meals. So those would be down on your carbohydrates also. Fruit too, of course, is a good carbohydrate source. I like to kind of have a little asterisk next to vegetables, non-starchy vegetables, and fruit, because produce can exist through all of these categories, or can accompany all of these categories. And they're super high in the micronutrients, which we also need every day, but in smaller amounts. So are vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. And so I like to keep produce kind of over in its own category, just so that people don't feel like, well, I can only choose one produce item if I'm choosing something from the carbohydrate category. Produce can be in your eating routine liberally. So when it comes to the carbohydrate category, yes, fruit is a carbohydrate. Yes, starchy veggies are a carbohydrate. But when it comes to fruit and other vegetables, I would just add those in liberally whenever you feel like it, especially for snacks, easy go-to snacks, and adding a bit of brightness and crispness to all of your meals. Okay, so on to the fat category. So I had her list out what are some of the fats that you normally have in your house, and invite you to do the same. So most houses, ours included, we have some oils, whether that's kind of a canola oil, an olive oil, coconut oil, any kind of basic like a sunflower or safflower oil, but some sort of oil. If you have a fancier pantry, maybe you have some of the like toasted sesame oils and things like that. And also butter, lard. I don't tend to see a lot of people cooking with lard these days, but that would definitely be included in this category too. A lot more butter. I think butter has a tastier flavor to it personally. And other things like spreadable either non-dairy margarines or butters, non-dairy versions of that. So those would all be also considered fats. And I like to put dairy in this category as well, mostly because for most of my clients, I'm advocating for full fat dairy, whether that's yogurt or cheese or milks or creamers. And the biggest reason behind that is there's just a greater satisfaction and pleasure factor with it. So because then we're talking about full fat dairy, it has a higher ratio of fat to carbohydrates. So I like to just put it in the fat category. And then also, as I mentioned before, your nuts and seeds, nut butters, peanut butter, almond butter, cashew butter, all of those go in the fat category too. So once you have all of your categories laid out and hopefully on a piece of paper in front of you, this is where writing it down will make your life easier. Then you, in a way, you kind of have a grocery list in front of you. So, and you're not trying anything new really at this point, because I think that's what I see a lot of, that it can be so overwhelming for folks, thinking like, oh gosh, I'm bored with eating the same things. I want to try something new. Like, I'll go look for the recipe. But like I said before, if life is being hard and complicated, we may not have time or the energy to sit down and leaf through new recipes. If that's part of the way that you find self-care and you like just having a relaxing time with your brain, leafing through cookbooks or magazines, go for it. Knock yourself out. But for those of us that maybe don't have the time or don't find that relaxing, then these steps can be helpful. So once you look through those categories and you notice what foods do you currently have in the house, maybe what do you need to add together, and like I said, think about where you might drop produce in the mix too. Are we going to have some chicken on a salad, or roast up a whole chicken at the beginning of the week, and then you can use it in enchiladas and salads and sandwiches throughout the week, what have you. So when you think about from a gentle nutrition perspective, ideally we want to have one thing from each one of those categories every time we eat. That doesn't have to be a certain volume of food. We're just choosing one item from each one of the protein, fat, and carb category. And as I asked this client, I said, I bet, she's been cooking for a lot of years, as many of you have as well. I bet you can brainstorm some really quick, easy go-to meals just by choosing one thing out of each one of these categories. It doesn't have to be fancy, it doesn't have to be glamorous, but if you've been cooking for any amount of time in your life, you know some basic cooking skills that can help you put those three things together in a somewhat tasty fashion. So for example, maybe and we do this a lot at our house when I've been working late at night with clients or late into the evening, I'll make bowls. I call them grains, beans, and greens bowls. I got that from my time of working with Whole Foods Market years ago. And it doesn't have to be beans, it could be any other kind of protein too. But literally in a bowl, we'll have some cooked grains, maybe some of those roasted veggies. We'll have some beans, could be some chicken or fish as well, and then a bunch of produce too. Whether I've done a batch of sautéed onions and peppers to toss on, or we just chop up some lettuce. Or I have to say, if you're near a Trader Joe's, any of their packaged salads work really great for this. It's literally open bag, put in the bowl. Some of them even come with their own dressing and their own sauce, so it can be super easy and super quick, and you don't have to have a lot of brain power into it. So that can be a really quick way to get dinner on the table in a hurry. And the other things with doing the bowls that makes it kind of fun too is if you have a lot of eaters in your house with a lot of different preferences and satisfaction factors, then you could put all those individual ingredients out on the table and have everybody mix and match their own. Kind of like grain, beans, and greens bowl bar or whatever. Kind of like a burrito bar. You could do that with the burritos too. So lots of options. The point being to just kind of take a step back, recognize that it is hard learning to intuitive eat after all these years of having prescriptions given to you and the how do I eat and the what do I eat, but you can totally do it. And by taking some of these just really basic nutrition 101 principles and applying them and then combining them together in one delicious bowl or plate or whatever that looks like for you, it doesn't have to be as complicated as it may seem in the beginning. So recognizing no matter where you are on your intuitive eating and savor food and body journey, that this is a practice and you're not meant to get it overnight. If you've spent many years in diet culture influencing how you eat, this is going to take some time. But you definitely have a lot of people in the same boat as you and cheering you on, and myself included. So if you want to get more resources and information from me and occasional recipes, I do occasionally put out recipes in my newsletters. You can get to that by clicking the contact link above this blog post. And you can also get to it by downloading the free 6 strategies to savor food without guilt, which has some even more supportive tools for you to go through. So I invite you to check that out also. There's also a Savor Food and Body Facebook group if you're a social media groupie and want to hear what other people are experiencing with learning to cook from a more intuitive eating perspective. That's a great place to go and get some resources as well. So you can just search for that in Facebook groups under Savor Food and Body. It is a private group, but we'd love to have you there and be happy to accept you into the group. So with that, I hope this was helpful today. Again, if you want to hear more tips like this or you need more clarification, don't forget to reach out to me directly. You can do that through the contact form on this page, and I'd be happy to answer your questions and stay in touch. All right, take care.